was on.
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, August 20th edition of the Finance Committee meeting for the town of Littleton. This evening we're going to be discussing, we're going to first introduce our new finance director. We'll get an update regarding the open finance platform that is going to be available to everyone in the town to use for transparency on our finances. We'll have a preliminary discussion of the library funding. We'll discuss a limited discussion of the budget calendar and the fall town meeting calendar with the town administrator. We will discuss some internal controls in moving forward from some of the incidences that happened over the last year. We will also discuss a reserve fund transfer for an internal control audit. We have a presentation from the Historical Commission. Ms. Linda Stein will be talking about the 12 Robinson Road facility. And we're also going to talk a little about the liaison assignments for this year, if we want to mix it up a little bit. Member input, public input, minutes approval if we have any, and lastly, adjourn. So with that, I'd like to introduce our new finance director, Ms. Cheryl Herrick-Stella. Hello.
Hello, thank you.
We've all been introduced, and I know you were been at a few meetings, but I don't think you've been formally introduced with your team, if you will.
I did not, so.
So welcome aboard. We're very
Thank you
glad
so
to
much.
have you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And with that, I guess the two of you are going to present
Maybe.
our open finance customer self-service platform. For those of you that watch the Board of Selectmen meeting, it's the same presentation, hopefully without a couple of the little glitches that
We'll see if it even turns on.
Software days, we used to say there's a rule when you do demos, you know, it meant basically
Shut it up.
something wasn't gonna work.
So I guess, Steve, could you talk a little bit about the platform in general before we get into the actual functionality of it?
Certainly. So this platform is called Open Finance. It interacts directly with our general ledger system. So once a week, transactions are uploaded into this system. It's every Monday it's refreshed from the previous week's work. It includes the entire town. It includes the town departments, school department, light department, and water department. The only thing that is different about having the light department in is they're on a calendar year basis. The town's general ledger is on a fiscal year basis, so there was some changing of their actual budget to kind of meld it into a fiscal year type of appropriation, but the light department's aware of it, and they'll update it as they change calendar years and they have projects that need to be updated. So they'll send us that information. Town's general ledger is not their main general ledger. They have their own general ledger. The water department has their own general ledger also. And we just shadow their transactions. So it's not, that's why it's not on the same fiscal years, that type of thing. Okay? So this is the website. It'll be live on the town's website starting Friday. We'll have a link up there. Town departments are going through and reviewing and getting prepared for a possible onslaught of questions once this hits the public. And that's a good thing, because it's providing the transparency that a lot of towns in the Commonwealth are now doing. You've heard open checkbook before. So this takes it one more step. There's a lot more information in here than just what we pay to our vendors. That's one component of it. The main tab right here, once we move down the page, is this operating budget piece, and we can just hit explore here. And this divides the town into four main components: the light department, the town itself, school department, and the water department. The light shading is the budgeted amount, and the dark is the actuals so far for this fiscal year, and we're dealing with fiscal year 2020. So at any point in time, we can drill into any of these lines. So we drill into the general fund, into the town, we see the funding sources, general fund, capital projects, and so on. We can drill into the general fund and get the next layer of information, which is kind of bringing departments into a little hierarchy. General government, public safety. I picked on public safety last night. I'll go to general government tonight. And you can see all the departments in the town that make up that general government tab, for example. So I'll do the treasurer. I'll take my hit here. And it shows salary and wages, what's been happening so far this year, and expenditures. You can see we're pretty lean on our budget here, $400 so far for this year. But this basically follows, if we were to look at a budget to actual report, we could drill into these certain things. And you see the top line, which is just the department budget, bottom line is spending and budget. This brings it down to the next line item, salary and expenditures. I can click into the salary and wages line and get the detail behind those salaries and wages broken out by our hourly people, department head, and the assistant manager. And we can do that for any department along the way. We can do it for the town in general. If I was to come back,
And Steve, that will even break down a step further for individuals, correct? Individuals in the department?
that's on a different card when we
Different,
get
okay.
into payroll.
Oh, okay.
We can see that piece. Unfortunately, you can't go from here, click into this to see the actual payroll that's happening. You have to go into a different piece of the software, do the same drill downs, and be able to see the actual paychecks. And we'll do that next. If I was to come back,
Just feels so,
Okay. Public sector.
I know, it's public sector, it's so different, so different.
if I'm coming back here at that main screen that I came into, you can see it says the entity. So this is everything again. At this point, I could use this drop down to come down and say, let me look at expense categories. So now this is the entire town with any expense category that we have. You can see salary and wages is still listed here. If I drill into salary and wages, now it's showing me for the entire town, have a budget of $28.3 million in salary and wages broken out by these categories. And then I can drill into each one of those, again, levels. School department, for example, I can drill in. This is their salaries appropriated to the general fund, and then the budgeted salaries for revolving fund go into the general fund, and their budget for the different school departments.
Pretty awesome.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the school salaries appear to be very low spending versus budget.
But they're not in school right now.
No, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, is that the teachers, I believe, have the ability to take 12 months' pay over 12 months, or 12 months' pay over the 9 months, that there were 8 or 9 months they were in school.
They're still paid on a fiscal year basis, so even the teachers who get paid during the summer, that money's been encumbered into last year, because it's last year's budget. So that,
So.
those dollars aren't
so
here.
that- okay,
The only
so-
dollars we're
so the-
seeing here
The
expended,
encumbrance goes to September, whenever they start school, is that? So the 3 months that they would get paid
Interesting.
during the summer.
July, August, and September,
June.
July and August, the summer months
Is last,
are paid.
okay. So all
We do
of,
5 payrolls
Okay.
at the
Okay.
end
That makes
of
it- that's
June.
why-
for
that's-
the-
Okay,
that's
so that's
really
why
why
it's,
it's
that's
fine.
why it's so small. Okay, okay.
Interesting.
So the only thing that's here
That'll change
right
quick
now.
next month.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that's here right now, the people who actually work summers, the
Skeleton.
principals,
The maintenance and.
maintenance people, the secretaries. Those are the salaries that you see right now.
Okay, okay.
When you say how's it funded, what does that show you up there?
Well, everything right here, we're into the general fund, so it's gonna show one big
Okay.
general fund.
Okay, just curious.
Okay, so that's the first tab. To get back, you always just return to the open finance.
When you were in your
page there.
count, can I just ask, when you were in your department budget and had expenditures, if you had clicked on that, how much detail would you get under there?
Well, my expenditure lines, we'll go back in so you can see.
Okay, does it go any further, or is that it? Can you go down to
No,
the
that's it.
vendors? That's it?
Again,
That's, the checkbook is on place else?
yes.
Okay. All right, that's what I was trying to understand, how much detail, how far down it goes.
Can I
Okay.
ask a
And you're where, good, good.
Do these map in any way to the accounts that things are billed against? Is there a way to see that?
You can't see the actual account numbers, but this mimics the general ledger.
Okay, so is there going to be a way of going from the account number to those?
No.
Okay.
But if you had a budget report for the library,
Mhm.
you could see that this would mimic that.
Okay.
And where is the library? I haven't seen it on any of the, maybe I just missed it.
So if you go back to the town, there's a little back button here. What happens, the way our chart of accounts is set up, we have the school department and the town with totally different ways that the account structure is set up. So a lot of what we're seeing here on these breadcrumbs, they call these breadcrumbs, so you can see the trail that you're at. You can see a lot of them are either undefined or school. We'll see once we go into
Category
the schools.
undefined. Okay.
So sometimes this back button doesn't always work well. It's best to go back to the top and work our way down. Okay? It's just the way they did a lot to work with our chart of accounts. It was a little difficult for them. So we go back to the town, we go back to the general fund, and it's in culture and recreation, thank you. And there's the library.
There you go, okay.
The other
So
way,
is there a road map someplace?
the other way that we could do this, I'll take the chance here, we go library. And there's the open budget for the department. It would take us straight to the library, so there's a down piece of it. So again, this is showing the entity. You have to come down here and go to, showing the revenues, that's why. So these are the revenues. We're in the revenue section right now from that drop down. So that's just another piece of the puzzle is, so we looked at the expenses. This card over here looks at the revenue component. So it's a separate piece. Same type of drop downs, same structure. We don't, historically haven't budgeted revenues, but that may change moving forward. Okay? We go into the vendor piece. Same type of drop downs. We go into the town. We can go into the general fund. And you notice right here, there's a checkbook tab. So now I'm into the town, $3.25 million for the town as a whole in spending. I could hit the checkbook option right now, and it's showing me every single disbursement that the town has made to a vendor to make up this $3.25 million. I can sort each column, when we go back to the top, I could sort it, ascending and descending. I can filter for a vendor, if I wanted to see all the Pitney Bowes payments. So here's our postage meter in town.
It's transparent.
So Steve, this is part of Munis, correct? Or is this completely separate?
This is a product that Munis has, yes.
So we were always going to be able to see this. Once we took on Munis, this was something that was coming, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
This has been in the plans of the selectmen for quite a long time.
Yep.
Okay.
Is this something we're able to do because we switched over to a new accounting system?
Yes.
Or could we have done it under the old kit system?
There's a lot of different software packages out there that do this. They all need an upload from the system. We had looked into one years ago to try and build an interface, but we knew we would have to switch off the software at some point, so we stopped that process and waited for this.
Okay.
Okay? So the rest of, to look up the different vendors, it works the exact same way. Drill down to where you want it to go and click that little checkbook icon.
You can search for a specific vendor as well.
We can search for a specific vendor. For example, I can, if I do ISO, and I know ISO New England is a vendor that the light department uses to purchase power. So here's their power payment.
And this is all to date this year.
This is through last Friday, this fiscal year.
Okay, so now we're creating a historical database starting this fiscal year. There's nothing that goes back. In other words, next year, we'll be able to look back. There's going to be a drop down. I want to look at 2019.
There'd be a drop down, this little drop down right here would have 2020, 2021, 2022 as we move forward. The reason why we're not doing 2019, even though we were on it, is the descriptions. You can see the description field right here on our checkbook. Departments weren't really aware that we were moving forward in this direction, so some of the descriptions that were in there are things that really should be confidential, and we can't just pick and choose which accounts we don't want to show or which vendors we want to show. So because of that, we really can't show 2019.
Okay.
So what is the process? If somebody comes and says, I want to know more about this, or I want to see the purchase order, or I want to see the detail, do we have it set up, like how that's going to work and what the expectations are in terms of responding to those requests and who's going to do it, and you're going to wait and see how much you get?
I mean, that's still a FOIA request regardless. If someone came to you and wanted to see a receipt for this, I mean, we can actually see the receipt right here. Anyone can see it.
You can see the payment that was made.
Right, but if you wanted
see
to
the
get into
invoice.
the actual invoice, what's the process for anyone in town to be able to see that?
You want to take that one?
Do they have to file a Freedom of Information Act?
Right, that's what I mean. Is it a difficult process, or is it?
I'm happy to take it. So we are looking into, and we have been discussing our different public records procedures. In summary, it is my approach, and one thing that we're discussing organizationally, that if something is easy to get our hands on and give out, we'd like to give it out as quickly as possible and provide the information. So a public records request, as you all probably know, but for anyone watching at home, can come either in the form of a written request or in person. Technically, you can't do it by phone, but honestly, if you were to ask for one document by phone, we're probably not gonna There's no need to make an issue out of that. So if the request is for a invoice back up to Pitney Bowes, the postage machine company that we use, then, you know, if we can get our hands on it and it's not deep down in the basement of Shattuck Street and so on and so forth, and doesn't require climbing over one box to get to it, et cetera, we're gonna give the information as quickly as possible. If residents or otherwise, another member of the public is looking for something more detailed, they're looking for copies of all invoices for Pitney Bowes going back to 2010, well, in that case, we're likely gonna create an estimate. We're likely going to produce that estimate and ask that the party pay for the estimated costs before we hand over the documentation.
Okay.
Because it's gonna take a tremendous amount of work on our part.
But even the easy ones, who is the "they" that does it?
Great
Because, I mean, we
question.
don't have a lot, right?
Great question. So we do have a records access officer. I believe it's called there's a specific name for it, our super records access officer, I believe it or not, is what it is, which is our town clerk.
Okay.
And we have records access officers in other departments as well, such as police and fire. In this case, you could go to either the town clerk or you could go directly to the finance department. And either way, there should be cross communication between those two parties to ensure that both groups know that a request has come in and a request has been fulfilled, so we're meeting the requirement under the law.
Okay. So it's another, so you have to log all these requests in as well.
The town
There's more.
clerk does to a large extent keep track of and make sure we're compliant, yes.
You know this is gonna generate a lot of questions.
And probably from a
The
handful
more
of people.
information you give people, the more information they want, so.
Yeah, okay, but it's, I mean, but it's good stuff. I mean, obviously, this is, gotta go there, and this is what
Yeah, let's see,
we
we'll
need
know,
to do, right?
we'll know by the end of this fiscal
Right,
year
right, right.
what
Yeah,
that
how
means.
bad that is.
Right. Or, and we had talked a little bit last night about, potentially, you know, after 6 months of this, maybe getting it up on LCTV, a presentation, you know.
Yeah, well, once we see what the most common questions are
Yeah.
coming in from.
Yeah.
the
An FAQ
residents.
type,
Yes,
yeah.
we can do
Okay.
an FAQ. So here's the payroll piece. It looks exactly like the others. Again, you can click into any one of these modules, and we can see here's the salary for each of those departments. We're looking at base pay, overtime pay, and red and other pay, and blue other pay would be vacation pay, sick pay, holiday pay, stipends, longevity payments, exactly, those types of things, anything other than actual base.
And the reason for the police being front-end loaded
The
compared
details?
to the other
Yeah,
departments?
it's backwards, that's all. The dark blue and the light
It
blue.
was the one.
No,
No,
Oh, that mean-
the dark blue is other pay, so they got their Quinn payments
Oh, I see what you're
okay, so,
in July.
so they
that's
get,
a lot
so
of
there
the
is
other
upfront pay that they get
Yes,
that the other departments don't.
yes.
Big
Okay.
guns here tonight, huh?
So we're looking at total payroll. We can click right here. And here's total employees in each area. And you can see from the shading, so full-time employees and other employees, so part-timers. So you can see, so here's their reserve officers, here's their regular officers, and so on.
Steve, have you tested the printing functionality of any of these screens? Is that a-
No, I have not. On the other tab would be this average pay.
Can you drill into individual people?
We can, if you notice right here, paycheck details. So now we're dealing with $1.64 million of town payroll, and this is how it is broken out. By person, by week paycheck,
to date?
fiscal year to date, yes. Again, you can sort on any one person if you wanted. You could see their things. You could drill into the department. I'll get your payoff there. I just landed on it. Again, you can drill down into the just individual department and see that department's pay and the individuals in just that department.
So what's the drill down next to the person's name? What's that gonna show? Even more?
This shows like a different card for each person that will break out their totals for the year so far.
To include it, would break it out to overtime and this and that. I mean,
Eventually, as we get cards, we can drill into the person and you'd see 2020 salary, 2021 salary, 2022
Yeah.
salary. So you'd have a comparison between them. Again, broken out by base pay, other pay.
so it runs right up against the PII wall, but doesn't cross over. Okay.
Okay. The other things for on the homepage, different navigation pieces, there's a search bar up here, a search bar right here. We have some common questions that we can control and we can change up over time. These are just things we came up with that we thought would be of interest. You can click into any one of these. Here's the debt service one. Interest principal, so what interest payments have we made on our debt so far this year? Well, here's the issues that we've paid interest payments on so far. Okay. We come back up to the top, so that was the common questions down here. This other things, little things that were built, so here's the top vendors so far this fiscal year. Again, you can click into this and it'll take you straight to that chart so you can see all the vendors instead of just what you saw in that first screen. So we have 477 vendors that we paid so far this year, and you can drill in. What I didn't show is all 477 will show as we scroll down this page. And we could click into Apple Inc. at some point, and we could look at all the checks that we issue to Apple Inc. So it's very powerful, lots of information.
Who is driving this stuff now? I mean, Bonnie was really doing a lot of this before, so who's actually driving the additional things that are happening now with the systems and so on?
I dealt with this after
Okay.
Bonnie left.
Okay, so you've been doing it. Okay, I'm just curious. It's a lot of work. I mean, I know it's involved to do
Yeah,
this stuff.
this was a lot.
Yeah, I know.
First I had to learn the general ledger, and then I. That's open finance.
Open finance.
Questions? On anything?
It's like open sesame, right?
Looks like Selectman Glavy has a question in the
I had
back.
the presentation last night, didn't think of my question until tonight. So. Steve,
It's good you slept on the phone.
yeah, I did, yeah, I thought enough to come down here tonight, ask you, but very impressed with it. But are there modules possible for other functions such as account balances and investments?
Not in this product, no.
Not from Munis then?
Yeah, not from Munis. That investment information is not uploaded from Munis. The balances are, but, and you could see,
The trust fund balances?
can you see that here? No, you won't be able to see that here. You can see the transfers in and out.
You have to talk to them about it.
I can ask the questions, see what I know there's other things that could be out there, not part of this product.
Because we're seeing revenue.
Additional Products.
We're seeing revenue.
But it's all
So you'd
budget
think you-
centric, nothing about,
Yeah, so that's-
nothing about.
P&L versus
budget
current
balance
account
sheets.
balances, nothing about investment,
Yes,
income and, holdings and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
right.
Right.
Is there any other questions?
We have one other thing that we're rolling out. And this is citizen self-service. And we have a request in here to hide these functions for now until we're ready to roll them out in total, but we're looking at rolling out this real estate tab. And what this real estate tab would do, and again, I'll use as a guinea pig, I'll search for me.
This mansion.
And what it brings up is we converted the data from 2006 all the way to 2020. And at any point in time, you could go in and look at the bill and see what was billed. So we billed for 2 quarters so far for this year, and it's reflected there. This would be good for somebody looking to make sure that their payment was applied properly. Now, we have people who have their taxes paid for by banks, and they escrow their taxes. Really, residents should be making sure that those payments are made and that they're applied properly. This is a way for the resident to come in and just check their account on their house to make sure everything is as they thought it should be. But there's lots of other detail here. There's assessment information, assessment history, so I can look at the assessment on my property going all the way back to 2006, going forward. And when the actual bills are generated for February 1st, and we generate those in December, last week of December, this would update with new values for FY20.
Well, this saves people a trip to town hall. They will look up these things.
The next question will be, can I pay my taxes from here?
You can pay your taxes straight from our website, and we have a handy link
here, it
right
goes
here
on
under
myself.
resources. Did I plant you here?
Oh, look at that.
Takes us right to our website
Beautiful.
to pay taxes.
Excellent.
So
Thank
just-
you for that one.
Just
That was-
curious,
That was a softball.
those other functions that we're not going to open up with real estate, which we see, but what were the other ones?
Motor vehicles and personal property.
Okay. So excellent.
We'll see how everyone reacts with the real estate information. Real estate that's out there right now is no different than what's already out there through the GIS mapping system that we have. Again, I could use this to look up my parcel. And all that same information, if I go into assessment, all that same information is right here. And it's pulled from the same source, Patriot assessing software. And this is updated every night.
Does that save people, like that are buying houses or selling houses and so on, looking at, coming to the town and asking for things, or is this available to them someplace else anyway?
This has been a good tool for people, so they're not coming into the
Yeah,
assessment
that's what I was wondering,
process.
yeah.
And we're looking to get that same, giving the access to the residents, but, Deb gets a ton of calls in the tax collector's office.
I would think.
What did I pay for this year, especially in tax time? When people are doing their income taxes. What did I pay last year? And direct them right to the website.
You don't keep your paperwork? Anyway.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's 2 things that will be coming probably the end of this week.
Great. Great news.
Okay?
Let me ask you a question back to the main platform. Special accounts like the LCTV, PEG account, can I access that through this and see each one of the payments that comes in from Comcast, comes in from Verizon, what the account balance is?
We can't see the checks that arrive. We can't see the revenue that has been booked into that fund.
Yeah,
So if I come to here, I'm on the revenue card now.
yeah.
I go to the town. I should be, let's do this. Let's do department. And LCTV, are they here?
Just went past it. Who's up? There. Oh, you're looking down here, there was one up above.
up above.
Was
Up
it?
above, it was, yeah, right there.
Oh, there they are. No, so there's separate accounts on the general ledger, depending on who's paying you. So there's your payments for this year so far.
Okay. Good.
Right? Thank you for that one, too. That was a good one.
Just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah.
That's-
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Any other, we're good?
I can just see all the staff required to support the soccer going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it helps, in the real estate piece, and some of those other modules will definitely help people from having to come here and take up our staff's time, but there are other parts of this that are gonna require probably, we'll see, more staff questions. Did we want to talk about preliminary library funding discussion as well, before we, I think that was something that we, you and I had talked about. That was realizing, I don't, you know, Mark, you're here as well, you might have a little bit of this discussion. What our options are based on, we don't know what the numbers are yet, but where we're going to be, so when we do get actual numbers from what the final library financials are, we'll be able to actually be a little bit ahead of the game to kind of decide how we want to recommend to the Board of Selectmen on the best ways to fund it. So I know you had shown me a couple different ideas. I think you might have seen a little bit of it as well. Inside the levy, outside the levy, blended situations. And what was the number you were using for that?
That was the original $13.5 million estimate that we had.
Okay. With borrowing at, was it 7 million, roughly 7 million we were looking to
Yeah, it
borrow
was
there?
coming around 7 million, but what I'm not counting is contributions from the library, so they're talking about $1 million or so when it comes up, so that'll
Right.
come off of that number.
Okay. I guess the other question I would have is, so those, we're probably not going to know till very close to town meeting.
So we are expecting the final cost estimate like the week before town meeting. We will have a better cost estimate between now and then.
Yeah.
We're going through one now. I'm
Okay.
trying to pick it apart to see how real it is. But the final one won't be until right before time. It won't make the printing of the warrant, it'll be distributed.
So we obviously will schedule to meet before town meeting the night of. We do that in the past, obviously. So that's probably when our recommendation of some sort will come forward. So that will have to be discussed at town meeting, what our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen is. You know, and I'm assuming they're gonna have to do the same thing. I'm not sure though, what your plans are.
I'm not sure what our plans are going forward. I can speak a little bit to the little bit of work some of us did last February or so. I mean, this is becoming realer, more and more real, and
Right.
no one was putting any scenarios on the table.
Right. Well, we wanna be able to recommend, it's kind of a weird thing, because we wanna recommend to you
Right.
what we feel is the best options available to the
That's
town.
fine. I think it's
But when-
awfully late in the game to be
Right.
looking at scenarios.
But-
So
so-
in advance of that, I know that, Anthony and Bonnie and I, and I know that at least one of them must have referred with Steve on some of the details, looked at scenarios, and I think the number we were using was a $10 million number for the library, but everything else was very conservative in terms of interest rate and time period and all the rest of that, and found that a full funding of the library under the levy limit was at least a distinct possibility without affecting anything and jeopardizing anything. It's a choice, there's choices. But this is a choice that over 80% of the town made at town meeting. This is the priority of the towns. That's the case I would make. So when we, dance around what to fund under the levy limit, what not to fund, this to me is a no-brainer. The town has spoken pretty loudly on that.
I mean, I think we'll each have our own, as we look at all this, probably, that might be the conclusion that we come to as a board. I don't know.
I'm making a case.
Right, I know you are, but I just, without knowing, exactly what we're looking at, it's more difficult for us, because we're literally gonna be waiting to the last minute to come up with a recommendation, so that's,
Well,
And we're starting to hear from folks that now that they know that it's a possibility,
Yeah.
they are not only advocating for the library, but I'm also aware we have a choice of how to do it, and would like to see it under the levy limit. Not a surprise, but.
of course.
A lot of times they
Well,
don't.
you always do, to some degree.
No, we don't know, we don't always hear at that level of detail, frankly, but we are now.
No, it's a nicer sounding thing to have everything under the levy, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's.
But there's reasons, there's other reasons.
But it's
why.
also a reality that we've had no other scenarios on the table. So now we do, that's great,
Yeah.
or if we are going to have some.
Yeah,
So I don't think you can wait to make a decision at town meeting, because it has to be a town meeting, and it's going to be outside, and there's an override, then we have to have the vote for the override
yeah.
as well. And you can't skip it, so I think you're going to have to run scenarios with a couple different numbers and figure
Yeah.
out what it is, and make the recommendation.
yeah, I think we have to come up with a number that we're comfortable with, that's somewhere in the ballpark, and work from there. Because I don't want to wait until the last minute, and then
No, I agree, I'm just
the
asking.
only option you've got is.
And I don't speak for the board, I speak for myself.
Right. So I think one of our meetings, our October meetings, we need to address this, not as a preliminary library funding discussion, but once we see the warrant, we need to discuss at that point what our recommendation would be based on the best guess we have for that number. I guess some of the other things that people need to understand is the grant that we're getting. So it isn't something that, when we vote in October, that there's a check written for $5.8 million. It's given over a period of 5 years, is that correct?
It's 20% over 5 years, based on meeting certain milestones.
Okay,
So where we're at now, we're pretty far along the
Yeah.
first year's milestone already.
yeah,
Right, because of the work that we've done since May, basically. So it's paid over 5 years. If we advance our timeline, if we had the library built, November 1st, it's still 5 years.
Okay.
Right, so,
all right.
Yeah, that makes a difference too, in the number that you're gonna finance, because we're gonna have to finance the whole thing.
Right.
Less 20% the first year, so.
So
I
it's
I would also add, so we're raising $1 million, but
Yeah.
some of that is pledges that people will be making over 4 years. So we're not necessarily going to, December 31st, have $1 million to hand over.
Right.
We'll have promissories of $1 million or whatever.
Right, and this-
We can, so,
Well, this is important because it plays into how we finance this, whether those first 5 years, we can get creative with borrowing as well because of that, correct? With shorter term type
I
loans and things,
I would suggest, I won't be treasurer by this
right?
point. I would suggest that we don't bond until all the dollars are in. So after the 5th year, we're getting the final check from the state, all the pledges are in, then we bond once we have it.
Yeah.
In this 5-year term, between now and, when we finish getting the funds from the state, we would just continually roll bands. And as we get the money in from the state, we
Pay the
reduce
bands.
what we need to roll. So at the end, we're just bonding for 20 years what is on our nickel.
Yeah, that's enough.
Okay. Right,
Because that's the number you want to minimize, is how much you're actually going to bond and be stuck with interest payments over 20 years. So you want to minimize that
Right.
number as much as you can.
dress it up front.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion? I mean, I think this will definitely be, we'll address this very heavy and probably early October. With the best numbers we have, we'll probably have you sit down with us and look through, the three, you're really looking at 3 options. And I know, Selectman Glaive, you've put a lot of work into understanding everything under the levy, what that looks like. Well, But we like all to see exactly what that looks like as well, and then
As you should.
I'll blend it, and then, you know, and then an outside, just, that's what we're here for, to help, and then we can hopefully give you our recommendation. And so,
Sooner you get at it,
Yeah.
the better, right?
So from my perspective, early October is going to, it will be harder on us potentially, right? Because if it decides to go outside the we have to get people informed on what's going on, and the longer the process takes, the
Yeah.
harder it will be for us to.
Well, the selectmen are driving this a little bit.
Well, we haven't been, but if you're inviting us to, we can.
Well, I'm just saying, you could tell us that you're going to decide when you're going to make that decision. When would you like our recommendation by, I guess would be the.
Speaking personally, the earlier it's in, the earlier we can get our own dynamics engaged. Because, I mean, just keep in mind, there's 5 different opinions on our board, and not all of them are even
Yeah.
that enthusiastic with the library. I am, but, you know, I respect that there are other opinions on the board that aren't. How that plays into what you advocate in terms of funding, that ultimately the whole town will have to play. Hopefully, everybody will figure that out, you know.
Yeah, and
in
I
a
do want,
reasonable way.
this all does need to be ironed out, obviously, before
Right.
it's on the floor.
But the sooner we get
But-
scenarios, the sooner we can
Yeah.
enforce the discussion.
All right, so we meet September 9th jointly. I don't know if that's going, you
Great
have
idea.
a pretty heavy agenda, though, that day, so I don't want
Nothing
to.
more important than this, Gary.
If
But-
I may, we are working diligently to try to have a material discussion at the September 9th
Okay.
Board of Selectmen's meeting jointly. You know, at this point, I haven't made that proposal, but full transparency, that's what we, finance team, are working on.
Okay. And then we meet again in later September, I believe.
When you say
That'll
proposal,
probably
you're
be
intending to
when we-
make a proposal on how to finance?
No, I apologize. If I said proposal, what I meant to say was options. The Board of Selectmen in their
Okay,
goal-setting
good.
session had discussed seeing scenarios by
Yes.
which this is within the levy, outside the levy, half in, half out, other potential
Great.
options. It's
Good.
possible that we will have, you know, a recommendation based on what we're seeing as the future forecast as well. At this point, we have not come to a conclusion.
And we meet again on the 24th of September. That would probably be when we're truly discussing we're voting. We're going to be voting on the warrants at that time. So that would probably be the earliest that we can do it, as far as,
Great, if you can come join us on the 9th, or?
well, we'll be there it's a joint meeting.
That is a joint meeting.
But whether this can,
Yeah.
you know, the warrant doesn't even close till the 16th, right? So,
We were talking about another joint meeting date last night, too. Do you remember offhand what that was? You know, day after a Patriots game, I remember that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There was, the Board of
Well,
Selectmen.
that's not till October.
That's a holy day, you know.
That's right, that's true. But there may be a scenario by which the Board of Selectmen asks to join
Fincom on a
Finance
Tuesday.
Committee meeting
yeah,
on the 22nd
it'll be on
of
our
October.
time, okay.
So,
All right,
so from the library's perspective, with Steve Moore, driving from the PMBC side, we've been meeting with the architect and the OPM about every 2 weeks to drive the process.
Yep.
Steve has been a wonderful asset on
Yeah,
this.
he is.
keeping it. And we're trying to keep the costs down and drive the project forward at the same time. And there's all the little things that come up that are, like the fire road wasn't
Right.
originally in the scope of the project, and now it's potentially coming in. So if that's paid from our budget or another budget, or, things like that. And there's all those other little things that are coming up, we're trying to figure out how to keep the costs down and inside, so. I would suggest since we won't have a final number to town meeting, that you just go through with, pick a couple numbers, 13, 14, 15, whatever, and run the scenarios that way.
yep,
The cost of construction has risen, but we're trying to keep things
sure.
reasonable.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other questions or discussion on? I mean, that's a really basic talk for getting us the ball rolling, but I think we'll definitely be digging deep into this. Now that we see that it's actually coming up on the warrant, you voted last night, I believe, correct?
Right. I don't know if we voted, it's the intended warrant so
Okay.
far, right? Yeah.
Gary, I have one more question. We're going forward at fall town meeting with the library because of the time frame on the grant, that we have to do it before
So-
next May?
So we were awarded the grant in July, we have 6 months as
Okay.
a town to approve it. It's 6 months or your next town meeting. If we weren't having a town meeting in the fall, we could get an extension till May, right?
Yeah,
But
'cause
it
it-
has to be done
Cancel the fall
at 6
town
months. of the
meeting.
next-
Yeah, there the people have mentioned that, why does it have to be done fall town meeting?
Yeah.
Is there a time frame that causes us to be jumping?
It's the state's requirement, it's the MBLC requirement. If we
But,
didn't,
but
if
we
we didn't
could,
vote it in,
but we could do it at the next annual, right?
no, because if there wasn't a fall town meeting, we
Oh,
could do it in.
if there wasn't, okay.
You have to do it at either, I mean, if you got the grant in July and we're having a meeting in August, I
I
don't
got
think
you.
they would make you do it, but it's the next reasonable town meeting.
So,
effectively.
so the choice is now.
Yes, we have.
There is no other
We
option.
cannot put it off.
Good, okay.
Is there anything else on the fall town meeting that's so sacrosanct that we can't just blow it off this year?
Yeah, sewer financing, I'll start with that.
Okay.
We're probably gonna need some transfers as well. Or budget amendments.
Well, transfers can be taken care of at the special in the spring.
Yes,
Do you feel rushed as the, no one's ever asked this question. Do you feel rushed into the October 31st town meeting?
From our perspective, I think we should have a good number for October. It will be at the last minute.
Yeah.
Right, just because of, we should have started earlier, right? We started in March, we should have started in January, right? And we would have been a little better off. I am a little concerned, on being rushed on, if the decision on how to finance it is delayed too much, how that's going to affect, a get out to vote or an information.
Yeah, I
type.
think that, that's a separate,
How we're disseminating that information gets much harder the less time we have.
I think the vote side is, it is what it is. You either have, if people are gonna vote for the library or not. So I think the finance piece, we're strictly as a board looking at what works best, knowing what's coming under the levy for other items, all of those things play into that. And obviously looking out a few years and what we're trying to
Right.
jam under the levy to make sure that we're doing the town right. So
Right.
those things just have to
No,
come into
no,
play, that's
what
all.
I'm trying to say is the less time we know, the less time between the decision and the vote, the less time we have to inform
Right.
people. Right.
It's not a perfect scenario, but I think we'll get there. I'm glad we talked about it tonight. I think we can address it in September, and we can get out, recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then they can do what they have to do.
I can also say that, the idea of delaying till May, while it does have some appeal, the way the construction costs are going, your number is gonna be even higher.
Right. Fair.
We heard from, some of the people that the contingency, the construction increases they're projecting for next year are in the double digits. So,
Yeah.
that what they're carrying, so, the longer it goes, the more unwieldy the price becomes.
You gotta love
Right.
tariffs.
Yes.
So we'll kind of do what we discussed. We're going to do 3, a conservative, and that might not be loved by a lot of people, but we have to do that. It's not, we wouldn't be doing justice to the town if we didn't show this is the worst probably case scenario. And then we can work ourselves back to what we think, where we are.
Don't even
The only thing I
classify
would-
it as worse because you're putting things on it. It's just different.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
Not
thing. If
worse.
this is something the town wants, we're going to get it. So it's just, this is all the financial side, what we recommend, and then the Board of Selectmen can do what they would.
The only thing that I would caution against is we can talk about the library and the different ways we can fund the library. But we're looking at a silo here. We're looking at one project,
Yeah,
and there's other things that are going around happening, senior center,
right. That's what
this building, I mean, you name it, we've talked about it. So to look at this in isolation without taking some of those other things into account and saying, what's the total impact of those projects? Maybe not next year, but 5, 6 years down the road. That should shape the whole discussion.
Yeah, and it has a
We
little
don't
bit. That's
have
what I was.
any- We don't have anything, any data or anything to go and to say, okay, this project is gonna be X, this project's gonna be Y. We don't have that right now. We have 3 million for a senior center sitting aside, but is that 3 million to purchase a DCU and use some renovation costs for the rest? Or is that 3 million toward construction of something? I don't know. Nobody knows right now.
Yeah, this is just town business. Nothing's gonna, every year, there's gonna be something new on the horizon, so, but I understand. You're kind of saying the same thing I am. When we're giving our recommendation, we're looking out, okay, we know this is coming, we know this is coming. Something's gotta give, and I think the town needs to understand that.
Exactly, and then when something does give, why is it,
Right,
why do these projects make it under and this project didn't?
right. That's the politics
That's-
side.
You know,
Right,
We've
that's
also
something-
got the sewer coming up on the same
Absolutely.
issue.
No, I absolutely, and,
Well, that comes with, it would only be presented with a fully funding mechanism too, so it's not like that competes with dollars with these other projects. But to the extent that the examination of possibilities for the library funding went on last winter, they were also done in conjunction with the senior center, although it's every bit the moving target. Steve painted it to be $3 million, could go in a variety of directions.
Yeah.
Was somewhat arbitrary and neatly matched the amount of money that happened to be available in the capital account. That could have frankly have been just as easily directed toward the library in some
right,
of those
correct.
scenarios.
Good.
So there are other considerations out there. I wouldn't say everything was considered, but it was looked at on what the potential impact would be on, say, capital plan funding and all like that. That's why I mentioned choices earlier. Sure, you wouldn't be able to get, say, 90% of what you want on that list. You might only get 80% or 75%. Those kind of analyses at least were done, but it's just the beginning of that process, not the end of it.
Right, well, I mean, I think everyone at this table knows, we have $3 million sitting there that could be
Right.
doing a lot more for the town than sitting there right now. Could be
It's
paying
not
down
doing
interest
any
on other
harm sitting
things.
there.
Well, it's not paying down interest, it's not addressing a lot of other things that, money could work for us a little differently than it is. So I think that knowing, what's sitting there with the senior center, the quicker we make decisions on that, the better, for that $3 million, because
We've had some great success over the years having savings account for open space purchases, for
No,
school
absolutely.
funding and all the rest of it. And I think saving for the senior center is
Yeah.
not such a bad idea.
There's also the
Right.
money sitting in the debt exclusion account that could go to one of these projects too, which, I mean, it's not a ton of money, but it helps.
Right, so there's a lot of I think that people are aware that there's a lot going on, there's a lot ahead of us in the next few years, and that's just reality. But
Well, the senior center money, nothing concrete is happening with that right now. I don't know why. Because certainly it was the expectation of those of us that were involved, along with the Board of Selectmen, that something, we'd put the money aside and we would do something. That something I had thought was going to be a request for proposals out to the public for anybody that had a building that met our requirements for a senior center. So we didn't have to talk about $10 million 2 years from now to build one. And the expectation was that we would get a reply back. The DCU building is one of the places we knew we'd get a reply from. That's 2.3 million. And then you got another $600,000 or $700,000 to do renovations. Now, why that hasn't happened, I can't tell you, because certainly it's my expectation that it was going to happen. So someone should move forward on that, and then we can forget about what are we doing with that. We know.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of logic behind what's going on as far as if the library is approved, it creates a little bit of a vacuum here, so now this discussion, what happens to this space, and I think I get a little bit why we're,
Yeah.
Well,
It-
not-
it actually-
but I also know what
What's
was
gonna
said.
happen with this
Alan,
space?
the topic actually came up twice last night. One, unfortunately, is an executive session because it did involve some discussion about a property that would have to be acquired. But there was also action on the senior center front in another direction that Nina perhaps can speak to.
Yes, two things. We we discussed and we approved a contract to move forward with an architect by the name of LLB Lerner, Lads and Bartlett's, I think. Honestly, it's a difficult name, but, so that contract was signed, executed, and delivered today. And in addition, I had a conversation with the architect about schedule, timeline, frequency in terms of when we would be expecting things to get off the ground. And we expect things to get off the ground very quickly because we have partnered with them in such a way that they understand the importance of this subject with the town. And
To do
They have a
what? Yeah, to
specific
do
charge
what? To
and
do
both
what?
Studied both this site and the DCU site.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
But that's not the entirety of our activity, but on that item it
Correct.
was.
Correct.
Right. I want to jump out of order if there's no more. I'd like to have, I know we're running a little behind from when I asked you to be here. So, Ms. Linda Stein, I'd like you to come up. We're going to move the 12 Robinson Road presentation up a few, and then we'll get into the other discussions. So if you could come up and talk.
You cannot piss them all off now.
No, you,
Is that yours?
it's just
Oh,
money.
is this theirs? Okay.
This is what we do, Paul.
I remember back in the day, Paul never wanted spending money. You remember those days?
Those days are gone. Those days are gone.
As long as we have growth.
And it's not malignant. We're all set.
Right. We're getting to that age, Fred, aren't we? Right. I speak inclusively.
So this is, if you recall, in July, our meeting, this was one of those things that came up regarding reserve fund transfer, and none of us knew, wait a minute, what is it being used for? We didn't understand exactly what was happening with that money, and was it something that's going to be reoccurring? A lot of things that would meet the criteria of a reserve fund transfer. So we were concerned, we put it off until we could get a presentation. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, well, thank you, because we want to apologize for not being here last meeting. Some of us didn't realize we were supposed to be here. We would have been here if we had known. So we apologize for not being here, and we thank you for
thank you.
bringing it up tonight. Trying to find my files. Is there anything you wanted to say first, or no?
The presentation you're gonna give is the
Yeah.
same on the selectmen got?
A little
essentially?
different,
Okay.
essentially the same.
All right, and all right, maybe while Linda's looking that up, our working group includes the two of us, as well as Carolyn Mueller and Rachel Robinson, and Ed Mullen, and is not here with us tonight, but everybody's had a role in trying to come up with a plan to make good on the promise we made with the Baker building, which is to determine whether or not, under town auspices, within a reasonable amount of time, we can get a use that gets the public, whether it's we own it and lease it out, or whether we own it and, or we sell it and it goes to a use that, has public access to it. We've got a couple of tracks we've got to follow at the same time, pursuing all those options, attaining the statuses we need to be eligible for funding from different programs, which is historic register, that sort of thing, seeing what the market is, and then keeping the building viable, minimally viable in that short term. We all know at the end of the day that if that doesn't work out, we can slap a restriction on it and sell it again, and that may well be where we end up. But what the pitch essentially is that having studied it, I guess, from about February till June, our proposal to the selectmen, our proposal to you is basically centered on the notion of putting us in a position to go out to RFP next spring for one of these uses, broad enough writ, so that it could be either a opportunity to sell it to somebody who's going to use it with a public purchase or lease it out. And if that doesn't all happen, by this time next year, we'll be looking to approach the fall 2000 and, to put on the restriction. The restriction's not a big deal at this point. We haven't placed it on there because frankly, we own it. Council's opinion is that as long as we own it, it's effectively got the restriction on it. If we go to transfer it, that's when we want to put a restriction on it.
Sure.
But in the meantime, there's a couple of minor costs which would not have been anticipated during the budget process, but are necessary, and we have to hire a couple of experts to get us in a position to be eligible to go after some state monies, and that's where all.
Okay, and that's
And we did all that in June. We were trying to catch last year's.
Yeah.
And we just got caught up in, we made our presentation third week in June. You guys weren't meeting again, so here we are at the beginning of the fiscal year where we would prefer have been on at the end of the last fiscal year. And they are time sensitive because we can't, the project has no funding per se. We're going after CPC funds for the building itself, but for some of these other technical services, that's what we need the reserve fund transfer for. So with that, you ready to
Thank
go?
you, that was
Because
great. I hadn't understood before that public access was a key part of this whole thing. I thought it was just preservation of that building.
I'll speak for myself and allow, Linda or who else to jump in. I think our first preference is if we own it and we have an opportunity to let the public get in there, even if it's being used primarily as a coffee shop, but you get to go in and look at the building, all the better. But if it goes back into just private residence, that's not a bad thing, it's just not as much of a public use, especially when we're, trying to revitalize the common and encourage those sort of things. So that is a objective anyway of ours at
That's
this point.
something new that I didn't realize before.
Yeah, I mean, we're not opposed to, selling it to a private person or a business or anything. We know that letter came in recently. Someone's interested as a, possibly private residence, and there, in the past, there's been one or two business people that were maybe interested, and that's fine. I think we should look at all options. And as Paul said, I think the public option is one to certainly keep in mind, because it would be a community asset. And it would, especially with the revitalization of the commons, so that's something to keep in mind, as it could be an opportunity for the town.
But it won't be forever open-ended, as Linda's about to explain, correct? You ready to roll?
Yes, okay. Okay, so, 12 Robinson Road. So a little bit about the history of the, let me just,
That'd be a way to expand that.
yeah, there is a way to expand it here. What happened? All right. So just a little bit about the history of the house. The house was probably first constructed in 1750 to 1780. Just some interesting history. The brother of Hannah Dodge purchased the house in 1885. Hannah was the first woman superintendent of Littleton schools from 1878 to 1882. In 1931, the first full-time police officer in Littleton owned the house. He reportedly stopped a car for speeding, and the driver was Amelia Earhart. Instead of giving her a ticket, he invited her to his home for tea with his wife. So it does have an interesting history. The property is currently zoned commercial because there's
Amelia Earhart is buried in the.
now we know where she
Can't
is.
find her anywhere else.
We could fund this through one of those TV shows there.
The property is zoned commercial because there was a blacksmith forge built in the backyard in the early 20th century. As everyone knows, the property was purchased by the town using CPC funds at the town meeting in May 2018. So the ad hoc committee, which is, all of us except one person is here. It was formed at a Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting on February 11th of this year. It includes Paul Glavy of the Board of Selectmen, Ed Mullen from the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, Carolyn Mueller from the Community Preservation Committee, me from the Historical Commission, and Rachel Robinson, a public representative from the public. The committee has been tasked with forming a plan for use of the house. So what we're here for tonight are two small projects. We're looking for funding for a National Register application and a dendrochronology study. The intent is to get the house on the National Register of Historic Places, which highlights its significance, and it's required for some preservation grant applications for things like feasibility studies, stabilization, restoration, and rehabilitation. National Register status may also qualify property owners for federal and state tax credits and does not place any constraints on what owners can do using private funds. I think that might have been one of the questions that this committee had. The National Register status can then be looked at as a value-added benefit. We are looking to hire a historic preservation consultant to complete the National Register application, and she would also work with state and federal government offices, which is it's required in that process. Just so you know, her usual fee is $6,000 to just write the National Register application, but because she's done a lot of work on this site in the past couple of years, she wrote a very wonderful report. She is charging us half her fee. She would normally charge $6,000, but she would only charge us $3,000 because she's done a fair amount of work on the property. Before the National Register application, we would want to do a dendrochronology study, which is a wood dating study of the structure. And that's needed to accurately determine the construction date. And that information would be included in the National Register application, and it would be used for other grants. The dendrochronology study involves taking samples from several different areas of the structure, and that would be $3,000. And we have quotes for both of these from experts in each of those fields.
And all that's being driven by that beam right there that we're looking at?
Well, okay, so this is the issue. Yeah, there's a beam in the attic that says, and that's the beam, that says it was built in 1673 by SP. For a number of years, people thought, yeah, the house was built in 1673, but based on a more recent survey by this preservation consultant person I mentioned, she, and I believe also the building inspector we had come look at the building before the town bought it, they both believed that the house was first constructed in maybe the mid-1750s, not as early as 1673. And the reason it's important to get that information is that for some of these big grants, like the state grant and federal grants and even some private grants, they want confirmation of an accurate confirmation of when the building was built in order to, say, yes, it's historic, and yes, we're going to give you this money. So so the beam in the attic contradicts the assessed date of the house of 1750 and 1780, and it leaves questions about the construction and historical narrative of the house that we need to answer. So as Paul said, we would like to pursue public interest, public access for the property. The subcommittee recommends pursuing public use as a community asset. The site is 8.84 acres, and it's within walking distance to Littleton Common. The house is positioned to be a key feature for Littleton Common revitalization, and it would fit well within the scope of the master plan. The property could be a potential space for community activities, socializing, and education, and it could be an opportunity to amplify the offerings of public engagement events within the town. It has the potential to be an attractive spot for a local nonprofit or business that would enhance the atmosphere of downtown Littleton and draw visitors from other communities. As Paul mentioned, there will be a deed restriction on the house. It was purchased by the town with a requirement that a historic preservation deed restriction is placed on it in perpetuity to preserve its historic character, regardless of who owns or leases it in the future. The town council's office has been working on, with the Historic Commission, to develop the deed restriction language. We've gotten pretty far on the language, but finalization of the language has to wait until we know who the user will be, whether it be a rentee.
Why is that?
Town council's office said the language would be different if it's a rentee, leasee, or if it's an
It's an
owner.
ownership thing.
And so she said we can't finish it until we know that, which is too bad. I thought we could, but we have to wait.
But that requires a town meeting vote?
No, I don't think so.
No, it's just a selectman?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we already have our authorization from the town,
Well,
I
the
think
town-
the earlier one,
That's what I'm
yeah.
thinking, that we wouldn't have to go back to
Yeah.
town. Okay.
So integrity of the building. The house is stable, however, it is in need of some repairs immediately or very soon. One is a new roof, and we're going to the CPC tomorrow night and asking for $60,000 for a new roof. The other things on this list are fairly minor, and we probably would ask the town to do some of those. I think some of it has been done. Securing entry points and replacing broken doors and windows, I think, has already been done. A little bit of pest control has been done. I think more needs to be done, and termite treatment and weatherproofing.
When was the house last lived in? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, a while ago. You guys remember?
So it's, I think 4 years ago?
Not lived in that recently?
Probably longer than that.
I think longer than that. I think it's been empty for a while. I don't remember. Some options, proposed uses might include any combination of the following: a cafe for morning and afternoon coffee, tea, pastries, and snacks. There's been a lot of people in town who have said they would love to see this space be a coffee shop.
Dunkin' Donuts.
No, better than Dunkin' Donuts.
Ye old Dunkin' Donuts.
Ye oldie.
A history museum with hands-on activities, butter churning, well water retrieval, candle making, cooking, other activities. Possibly an art gallery, gift shop, venue for special events, business meetings, retreats, weddings, concerts, Easter egg hunts, and other nonprofit or for-profit ventures. And an RFP will be issued and bids will be reviewed. The time frame is, we're pursuing funding options for stabilization and rehabilitation, and that includes a key state grant that I mentioned earlier, and that grant is actually available only for municipalities or nonprofits. It's not available for businesses, so that's something to keep in mind.
So if we got a municipal grant and, I don't want to say upgraded, but solidified the property, then we could sell it? Or would that put a restriction on what the town or the municipality could do with it?
No, I don't believe there's any restriction on that. I will check into
I
that, but
just didn't know whether
Yeah.
you get.
Not
the
certain of
grant.
that, Fred, but I think we're okay on that. It's more about preserving the building, not about its ultimate disposition or ownership.
Okay.
But it's definitely a question to be
Okay.
asked.
yeah, I'll check
Just
into
so you
that.
don't get sidetracked on
Yeah,
that. That's
good point.
great.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any restrictions on use with
Okay.
that grant. Then obviously, we're also pursuing the Dendrochronology and National Register application that we're here for tonight, looking to get CPC funds for the roof, town funds for the Dendrochronology Study and National Register application, and state and federal grants for additional preservation efforts. We're looking at a one-year timeframe for public input, grant research, and creation of the RFP to put out to bid for prospective occupants. That's all I have.
The only thing I'd add, time frame wise, from what we're aware, annually, the Mass Historic Commission grants generally come out in about March every year, is that right? And to be eligible for them, you have to have that National Register status, which is generally a slower process. We're hoping our consultants will help us along with that. Evidence, just based on what other towns have been getting, is that if you have that status and you put in a grant, and we have all sorts of things we would be eligible for, usually towns our size or projects in this nature get about 50 grand. And that would certainly help with some of the upkeep and maintenance issues that would make the property more viable to a commercial use or some other use. Because so far, we were looking at, God bless them, museum proposals, good business plans that interpret that they would have to take on all the cost of doing it, and that just makes the bottom line tougher and tougher to get from red to black. So I think we have to assume, if we want it to have that kind of use, some degree of funding to preserve it. And if we're able to get state funds or federal funds for some of that, all's the better.
Right.
So
And
if
just,
if the timing doesn't work out for this coming year, are you suggesting that we would go ahead anyway?
Go ahead with the RFP.
Either the RFP or.
We haven't fully had that conversation yet, but I mean, I think that's, we know that nobody's gonna wait forever on this.
yeah, and there are other grants we could apply for, it's just that this is a really good grant to apply
Yeah,
for.
the likelihood of getting it is great, and the
Yeah.
timing would fit with our process if.
If you can move the glacier.
Right.
And just to mention, moving forward, after a grant like this, which is for stabilization and rehabilitation, there are a lot of museum grants out there if the town decides to go in that direction. There are a lot of those kind of grants out there, then if, we could apply for a lot of those grants.
But if we don't get a grant, are you then going back to CPC for the equivalent of the 50,000 to do whatever you're gonna do with it? Or you're gonna come back to the town for that kind of money?
We haven't had that conversation, but I would say this much, I think it's fair to say, I think we're kind of committed to the timeline, so that going out with an RFP on schedule is more or less, that's the goal. Now, if we don't end up with the funding, that's, I don't think that's a deal killer, that's just another problem we have to deal with.
Okay.
And backing up from that March deadline of this state grant that we'd like to apply for, there are a number of steps to be done, and the initial steps are really the dendrochronology study
Right.
and the National Register application, and that's why we're here now, and we'd like to get the money soon so that we can proceed and move on with the
Okay.
rest of the grant process.
I guess that's kind of where but just curiosity, so I'm looking at the first two bullets. Why not go to CPC for 66,000?
So we are going,
We'll
okay.
spread the love around a little bit, huh?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking the reserve fund, why we use it.
So-
You had me at why we have to do it, we try to get this in the end last year.
Honestly, it does come back to
You're
this.
seeing CPC tomorrow.
Yes, but when we made this request, it actually was in June, and we were aware that you were close to the end of the year. We all were close to the end of the year, and that balance hadn't been touched much, and it was actually my recommendation that we go in both directions. And part of it is, the CPC also is feeling like everybody comes to us for everything, and that's, so part of it is,
And the money's not available.
That was my question.
Well,
This money's probably a little quicker to get.
Till fall, right.
Well, that's part of it. Okay, so tomorrow night, we have a CPC meeting.
jump in if you.
We are, tomorrow night, we have a CPC meeting, one application for the roof, which should just be
Yeah.
very straightforward. We are not sure that these two projects, the dendrochronology and National Register, are CPC eligible. That's one reason we came to the town first. Tomorrow night, that decision will be made whether these projects are eligible. If they are eligible, if the CPC tomorrow night deems they're eligible, we could use CPC funds for this. And we will let you know that. If it's deemed not eligible, then we're stuck, and we would like to ask the town for $6,000 to do these.
Well, the reason really is because we want the money now.
No.
Because if we go to CPC, we won't get that until
You won't get it
November, so
until
that's
fall.
what's starting.
Okay, that's a big deal, because I would say we would vote on this September 9th in our joint meeting, if CPC said no. But if that's a
really-
bigger deal,
that's
for
really
sure.
the bigger deal.
That is a bigger deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a month makes a difference, frankly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The timeline you just mentioned, for sure. Okay.
Suggest we just go for it.
Okay. Any other questions? Just.
I'm just curious, how big is this? I mean, you're talking about a coffee shop, but it looks, some of those pictures, and when I look at that, it looks like a big place.
Oh, yeah, well, it would be a coffee shop and a museum and an art center. It would be things combined,
And the
probably.
senior center, because it's an old, and seniors are old anyway.
Oh, why not?
I think he was a
Yeah.
young guy.
The layout,
Casino in the back.
the layout is not good for
Look,
seniors.
I'm of the mindset, no matter what we put in there, the coffee shop's gonna be the most important part of it. That's gonna be the most popular spot
That'll sell
anyway.
the
No offense to
project,
every other use, but.
'Cause
Is
we
that
can use
within the
barn.
cannabis zone?
There we go, put the pot shop in there.
There we go.
Robinson Road is already
generation
up in arms.
Off the rails.
So,
All right, any other questions?
Anything else we wanna add to?
No, I think that's it.
do we have,
That's our pitch, folks.
All right. Well, I guess, thank you for the presentation.
do we have the reserve fund transfer? Or?
Do we need paperwork and so on to actually do it and sign it
we
and things
have
like that?
We can make it happen.
I thought we already had that, I'm sorry. Because we had one before, no?
I'm not sure if we prepared that last time. Did we have a version last time, Steve, by any chance?
We didn't have a form to fill out, no.
No.
No, it was, we didn't, I don't think we had forms.
So the question is, can we vote on the reserve fund transfer without the form? I think we can.
Without the form, yeah.
But
The
you have
form
to
is
sign them.
administrative.
You all have to sign
No,
it,
just-
right.
Was specific on the dollar amount and the,
Okay.
and the, and the.
So
I'm
is
not
it-
sure who you're looking at here.
No, I have both of you. Glad you're together. Okay. So, can I have a motion for the reserve fund to be used for a $6,000 request for the dendrochronology?
Did any of you actually know what a dendrochronologist was
I
before
wasn't
this?
gonna,
I
I wasn't
did
gonna
not.
look silly, I was gonna
Learn something
Google it. You can tell us.
So moved.
What
What he said.
What he said, so moved.
I'm not gonna
Yeah, you
tackle
can't do
that.
it, yeah.
Well, there were two $3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So
One
we
is
need
for
to
the,
We do it
at least get the
separately?
language
National
right
Historic
before we
Register
vote.
consultant, right, preservation
National
consultant.
Register and then dendrochronology.
Okay, I'll recommend that we approve a reserve fund transfer in the sum of $6,000 for dendrochronology and National Register
Application.
application for 12 Robinson Road property.
Second?
First and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Second, I second.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
See you
Appreciate
tomorrow.
it. And thank you for reminding me to,
For what?
thank you for reminding me to be on the agenda because it was gonna slip. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Great.
So we will probably prepare a form for your next meeting, just to administratively,
That can be the joint September 9th.
yeah, September 9th is perfect.
All right, we're back on track. Nina, I think we were going to talk about the, well, a little bit about the budget calendar and also the fall town meeting calendar. I think I sent that out to everybody.
Yep, you did.
I guess one of the first questions is, I know you're still working through the budget calendar, and in your, I guess, preliminary look at how we've done things in the past, are you thinking about doing things a little differently, recommendations maybe that are gonna change this first year, or we wanna get?
Admittedly, I think it's a little too early for me to answer that question. I feel that I have to put a lot of focus into the fall town meeting at
Yeah.
the very moment, not to say that we're not actively meeting and working on, Steve frankly catching Cheryl and I up to speed on, what has occurred in the past.
Yep.
But I am putting a lot of effort and energy into the fall town meeting because of the deadlines on that subject. That, again, I expect to be in a much better position to answer the question on September 9th.
Okay. Well, let's move right into the town meeting timeline, I guess, for the fall town meeting. You guys, you can share. I think I have an extra. Here you go.
Sharing.
Okay.
Did you want me to go through?
Yeah, please, yeah.
generally?
That'd be
So,
great, thank you.
Absolutely. I've used the same format that has been used in the past. It was certainly helpful as a guidance, if nothing else, as a guidance document to help me understand some of the different steps that have been taken. Every community does these types of things a little bit differently. And so, in this case, there are different statute references and there are potentially different town bylaw references in this document, so it was particularly helpful. The deadline, the first activity is that there was a deadline for voter petitions to amend zoning. That's required 90 days before town meeting per the town's policy. So that had passed on July 30th. At yesterday evening's meeting, the selectmen called the special town meeting warrant and opened the warrant, and we discussed preliminarily warrant articles that may come before us this fall.
Okay.
At the bottom of this timeline, you also have a list of those warrant articles. In addition to those that are listed, the others that were raised included potentially the Brown property on Tahadawan Road, if that's correct, and that was just listed in the event that we were ready, though I think that the board, or the members of the board, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, who've been working on this, think it's probably not gonna be ready, but in the event that it does become ready, they were putting it on my radar, which was beneficial to me. And then also, the potential for another property acquisition that Paul had alluded to earlier today as well, but it was an executive session, so we didn't necessarily discuss it publicly. And then finally, just discussion on the sewer articles and how many articles may or may not be needed to process a transaction or multiple transactions. at
Before the
school.
spring, okay, laying the groundwork.
I mean, one bit of update worthy there is we're gonna memorialize it, I guess in prime time in early September, I guess the meeting on the 9th, right, Dina? But
Yes.
we've had immediately mutually beneficial conversations with Light and Water Department about being the entity that will run and prospectively a third new wing of their outfit, a sewer department. So that question, which was starting to come up in the spring, and we'd always thought that would be the case, but we're formalizing that right now, and they're really diving into it. And we're finding, I personally think we're finding their internal resources of immense value already, stuff that we're getting out of those folks that we had been previously dependent on, our consultants, engineering consultants, and frankly, I think some of the information we're getting internally is better than some of the stuff we're paying for externally. And we all know what a good track record they have in terms of serving the public and all the rest of it, so we feel real good about that part of it.
And how do they feel?
Well, they said yes.
That's the bigger piece.
Yeah. In fact, well, we were invited to their meeting,
Okay.
and they made a pitch to us. I mean,
Okay.
we've been kind of mutually having these, they've always been part of a working group, but
Yeah.
it was never formalized, and we decided, well, it really has to be addressed. It's gotta be, the town is entitled to know who's gonna run this thing. And given the opportunity to make their pitch, they made it, and, pretty soon, they're gonna leave us in the dust real quick, but in the interim, it's still our project.
Okay.
So this will be memorialized in an MOU or?
Yeah, we're in the depths of an MOU, which is, it went from being simple to being complicated to being, well, it doesn't really need to be all that complicated because it doesn't really have any legal meaning until town meeting votes to change status. So, it's more or less a PR statement that we will be mutually agreeing to upon in September 9th. But in reality, we're already working in partnership toward handing over both the project to them, both through the construction and the operational ends of things.
Good.
There's parts of it that we'll stay at the table for throughout the whole project because we have an interest in it from some variety of aspects, the community development pieces of it and all like that. But as far as building a sewer, running a sewer, that's more in their bailiwick, not ours.
Is that pretty common, just out of curiosity, other towns that have their own municipal?
Well, I mean, it probably Nina's got more experience in other towns than I have, but keep in mind, we're a little unique in that there's only, 37 communities in Massachusetts that have municipal light departments. Until Mass Electric back in the 1920s figured out what a great idea it was, and they went to the legislature and banned any more communities from getting into that business. So that's how that went down. Other towns that don't have municipal light might instead have a DPW structure where it would be paired up with, but our departments that already have a billing and service thing, that's light and water. So.
And then there'll be personnel to come.
Yeah, and actually Nick has mentioned there are a couple other communities that do have the same model.
Okay.
I can't think offhand who they were.
Georgetown, maybe one?
Yeah, you probably, thank you, I think you're right.
Have there been any changes made based on the community's concern about where it is and all that stuff, or we've said, no, we've addressed those and moving forward?
Well, the
or what?
location, very seriously, and we're, I can't wait for the day when we can say where the next spot's gonna be, but all the attention has been toward a couple of other alternatives, one which took a turn for the better on last week, which should be in a spot that has a lot of benefits to it and very little negative impact in terms of being far away from neighbors. And actually, Plan B at this point is similar in that regard. The likelihood of coming back with a proposal that's at the highway department site is almost nil in my mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that will be something that long before town meeting will unveil.
Where are those two sites, Paul?
Catch me after the meeting, happy to share it with you. And there's actually a couple others in play, but two priority ones.
Right off Neshoba Road.
Perfect.
All right, sorry, Nina.
No worries. So at the Monday, September 9th meeting, the goal would be to have a draft warrant and an opportunity for the board to place the articles, perhaps discuss order if they should so desire. Obviously, these could, to some there's some fluid motion with some of these. If we do it earlier, that's great. If we do it later, not good. Then on Monday, September 16th, the warrant closes, which means that all departments, boards, committees, commissions, and citizens petitions must be in by that date at noon. And then on Monday, the 23rd of September, the selectmen finalize basically the warrant, and, you know,
We meet on the 24th, by the way, so that
okay,
falls in line.
excellent, that's helpful. And then the next several days are used to finalize the warrant with town council to make sure that the intent of the board is, you know, is captured on the warrant and is actionable by town meeting, of course. And then the warrant is posted on Friday, the 27th. Then following that, there would be recommendations on the articles at a Tuesday, October 1st meeting. It was proposed until last night. As of last night, we've agreed that we will be meeting on October 1st and taking up those actions. It's an important meeting that we can't miss, considering the fact that the town meeting report then needs to go to the printer on October 3rd, which is a pretty tight time frame. Fortunately, we have notified the printer, and the printer understands what our timeline is and is confirmed that they can make it happen. Then the town meeting report must be mailed at least 14 days prior to the special town meeting in accordance with our town bylaws. And then finally, really, the town meeting convenes at 7 p.m. There are other details, as you mentioned. For example, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee typically meet in advance of town meeting, so those minor details aren't necessarily here. And it's my understanding that there's typically another document that goes to the prior discussion about the 2021 budget process that gets created by the finance office, and we plan to have that to both boards before the meeting of the 9th.
Okay. Yeah. Anything? We've been here before, so. I think it's good. All right, well, thank you for that. Questions? Let's move on. Find my agenda. Paper everywhere. All right, next, Nina, I know it's a sensitive issue that the town's dealing with, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the internal controls that you have talked about with me, and you shared with other parties involved in the town. And not so much, and this is all in relation to the recommended actions to the financial investigations that have happened over the last several months. I don't want to get into, and we can't, just to let the public know, we can't get into details about, unfortunately, the specifics of what happened, because there is still, the district attorney still has an open, this hasn't closed it yet. So what I want to talk about as a board, and you can help us with, is what has done, what have you done, what the different offices have done to secure internal controls, and really looking forward. That's where I'm at, is, and I think we as a board will get the details. We know a lot of the details, but I understand that we really can't talk about the stuff in the past, and that's really not our charge. That's something that...
Yeah, although, and this is the new, Nina too, I did happen to be talking to Chief Pinard today, and he's of the understanding that the legal part should be wrapping up very quickly, and we should be free, and he should be free to give a full as possible
Sure.
Explanation to the public at large, at least in as much detail as we gave an executive session with you folks. So,
Okay.
and we're looking to do that as soon as possible.
Okay, and whether that's at a joint meeting?
Yeah,
Whether it's
I
another
don't
format?
know the
Sure.
format, we're gonna have to discuss that.
Yeah. Could it be an LCTV?
Right, it should be.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's just talk about, after knowing some of the vulnerabilities that we had, and some of the things, I know you came into this, both of you, and some of the things you've learned, that safeguards that'll help prevent anything like this from ever happening again.
Sure, I'm happy to speak on this issue, and I would welcome both our staff members to jump in, and I would also welcome both of our board members to jump in. We've all intimately been involved in this conversation. So collectively, the board, myself, our finance team, these are some of the actions our high-level finance team managers have taken. We completed the financial software conversion to Munis in fiscal 19. The software provides added capability of improving internal controls. For example, electronic invoice approvals and workflow rules have been updated. So, there is set structures on who must approve an invoice for it to go down into the process in the accounting office to actually go through. I'm certain that there were protocols in place prior, but the difference is there's actual assignments in a computer system, in a database where, it's black and white, basically.
Yeah.
And an automated P-card transaction entry has been implemented, which is, we're finalizing testing with implementation scheduled by the end of August. I'd look to Steve or to Cheryl for more information on that. The accounting office has been working to ensure that all accounts payable requests have either had an invoice or receipt provided, and make sure that that documentation is there in the moment of the transaction. Otherwise, it's held and kept until backup is provided. All vendor warrants are being reviewed at a high level by myself and, of course, by our town accountant. So it's going through a 2-check process. And there's specific detail and attention being paid to things such as credit card charges, reimbursement requests, and larger transactions. We've also begun a review of vendors to ensure that proper documentation is on file, to make sure that each of our vendors have a W-9 on file, and make sure that that W-9 is current, or if there are any changes, that it be updated. If we see that a vendor indicates that they have a new address, we would obviously go back to that vendor and say, you need to provide a new W-9 before we can process payment. And then department head reimbursements have now, through Steve's direction, been redirected to my attention so that they're all being signed off by me before they're even really being considered by accounts payable. And of course, department heads are signing off on their respective staff and their reimbursement requests as well. We, as part of the process in hiring our new finance director, a part of the job requirement is that the position be bonded, which was not the case with prior positions because it's not required by statute. So we've moved in that direction. So those are some of the things that we've already done as a collective group, the selectmen, myself, and the finance team. Beyond that, we're looking for your approval this evening for an internal control audit for funds for that process. And we also plan internally to review each and every credit card that we have issued as an organization to determine whether that credit card needs to be issued, if we can reduce the number of credit cards out there. Is there another process that we can take on? Can we go to a scenario that's much smaller than the scenario of credit cards that we have today? I do, from all things that I can see, there is an organizational efficiency and need, especially in certain departments, for credit cards. Again, that's my perception right now. I think we need to evaluate it. I think we need to have really healthy discussions, and we intend to take those on immediately. Then shooting out further into the term, because this is going to be an ongoing evaluation process in terms of making sure that our entire picture is solid. Not just the one area where we have identified that there's an investigation going on, but for the health of the organization, the board, myself, and the finance team all feel it's important that we look at the entire organization. And so we're going to do a deep and continual dive on procurement contracts. Fortunately, I've been reassigned that job again in my career, up until we get an assistant town administrator. And then this next line is not intended to mean we have any, but a review of relationships, potential conflicts that might exist with vendors. If a let's say, I'll pick on myself, let's say I was cousins with somebody who did business with the town and I had direct approval of that work, that is something we need to look into. Now, a cousin may not be a conflict under the conflict of interest law, but those are the kinds of things we want to talk about and think about. It may be a more immediate family member, but I won't get into boring you with the conflict of interest law. And then we also are going to continue to clean up old appropriations. There were a number of different things that Steve brought forward at one of the more recent discussions between for the Finance Committee's consideration and knowledge, as well as for the Board of Selectmen, and indicated that the things that we were closing out, we'll continue to look and review those things and continue to close those things out.
It's a lot of work. Thank you, Steve.
It sure is. Most of which all of us never truly understand in the end, and Steve and others work very late for those kinds of things, so thank you, Steve. And then we have assistants available to us through the Technical Assistance Bureau and can utilize them. We did have a very positive meeting with the Division of Local Services, which is essentially the group you all know, but for those at home, the group that ensures that cities and towns are following the laws and requirements of the Commonwealth. And they reminded us of their Technical Assistance Bureau that could help us with any questions we may have as part of this process as we try to go through evaluating our organization. Of course, we will obviously use our new auditor, Melanson Heath, as well as any other resource we have available to us to continue making.
That's probably a good segue in that we will be meeting at the joint meeting on the 9th. That is on the agenda, is to meet the new the auditor, and will there be a presentation involved with that, or just it's more of a...
I'm sure the auditor will come prepared
Yeah.
to say a few words and talk a little bit about their firm. And then you all will have your opportunity to ask your questions of the auditor, including the select board.
And that isn't to say that our previous auditor had some issues with what they did. And I know that was a concern of this board. And I think anyone would be, how the heck did an auditor catch this? I'll discuss that, I guess, in my own. We did, Fred, myself, and I think Steve attended the Inspector General's presentation. That was great for us because it was held at the police station for all municipalities, finance, the good array of everybody that was there. And we watched a presentation, and it really attacked the heart of some of the things that alleged that had gone on here over the last several years. And he spoke about other communities. Obviously didn't know anything about our situation yet, but many other communities that he was able to talk about, to include, towns, but also some of the colleges and universities. And really, one of the things that I think struck Fred and I both was we talked about the audit, town's audits. And he said that they only catch 10% of any type of fraud or, alleged use of cards or really anything. And it's not, I think we put a lot on the auditor. I think we can probably get a little more creative on what we want them to look at. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to beat internal controls and strong financial policy. That was the lesson we learned. And if they are in place, that we're following those procedures. That's the other piece. But I was surprised personally to see how many communities have had issues within just the last 2 years. If we just want to look at that, a snapshot, it was astounding to me that there's that many communities that had some type of financial abuse of, be it cards or just in general, general fund stuff. That it was just, it was eye-opening. I almost wish I had attended the training a year ago, but it was. I'm very glad I did. We both got a lot out of that presentation. So I know, I think you were part of putting this together, and I know
I can't take credit for it. I came in at the last minute. I understand that our interim
outgoing
town administrator, Anthony Ansaldi, had put it together in conjunction with our town clerk.
Yeah. So I don't know if you had anything else.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I think we're trying to get our hands on the PowerPoint deck, because I think it's really pretty self-explanatory. I think it's pretty powerful from what I could see. And they claimed that they would send it out to attendees, and
Something you can share with us if you
oh,
can.
absolutely. That's what, I think it would be really good for, Nina and her group to look through it and even, present it to staff and whatnot. But it's, I think, a pretty well done. It took like 3 hours. It wasn't a half-hour presentation, it was a 3-hour presentation.
Yeah, he said it's when he does it by itself, a standalone, it's a full day.
Right.
So he condensed it.
He really condensed it and did a good job. But I think if we can get a hold of the deck, we could probably do something internally that we could tailor to our situation and, give people confidence that we know what we're doing. This is what we're doing and why, and have our employees sit through it as well.
I'd be glad to follow up with Mr. Cohen on that.
Yeah, that'd be great if we can get a hold of it and maybe even sit down with him and see what his thoughts are in terms of how you would construct a 1 hour or 2 hour presentation.
Good idea.
All right, so I guess another piece that we needed you to speak to, I guess the internal control audit and what the reserve fund transfer. Cheryl, do you have, sure, so we can discuss that.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
So, do you want me to come up here or something?
I know it's,
Whatever you
yeah, it's not a really
comfortable
long,
with.
I know it's not a long presentation or anything.
No, so, as Nina mentioned, one of the points that was something we discussed with DLS and Board of Selectmen was an in-depth internal control audit on the finance and accounting operations. And that is looking at everything that we do, payroll, AP, how we budget, how we move funds, anything and everything that is related to the finance and accounting function. And, outside of it, I think being a good practice because of what happened, I also think that it will be really beneficial for myself and for Nina to get a picture as far as where are some of our weak points potentially, where are some potential risks, really get a true understanding of the operations and where, if there are any other areas aside from the areas that we've already identified that we want to focus on, that we should be focusing on going forward. This is something that honestly community should probably do anyway, just considering what goes on in the finance and accounting department. Other communities should routinely be doing this level of deep dive and having an external auditor come in and look at this. Outside of, the regular financial audit, as you mentioned, they're really focused on the financial statements and, they're not kind of going in and doing detailed testing of every little process and transaction that you get with an in-depth internal control audit. And this is different too than one of the things that we have in the contract with Lois and Heath is to do departmental audits. So we'll be able to pick one department every year and have them do a little bit more of a specific look at that. This goes even further than that. And so because of that, we're requesting a reserve fund transfer so that we can engage with Clifton and Larson to start the internal control audit.
Yeah, I think,
Excuse me, and you reviewed this with the selectmen?
Yeah, that's right.
And I assume they're in agreement, or they voted to support?
You received it separately, and we certainly could have discussed it. I didn't hear any issues, so. I know that the selectmen have discussed, in general, doing an internal control audit in prior meetings, and it's been the intent all along.
yeah, I think,
I don't think it's an issue, it just didn't, normally we.
Yeah, we didn't vote on it last
this,
time,
it's
the whole thing. I think
your
we discussed
department.
this earlier on and just knew it was in process. I can't pin down when we gave the thumbs up on it, but I think it was probably actually an exchange of emails, frankly.
Okay, that's fine, you're here, so ask the question.
So I think we really probably can start discussing how this plays into becoming part of our financial policy. Whether this is every 3 year, I don't know, 4 or 5, every other year, I don't know. Obviously, we're being our general audit every year, but somewhere
With
in.
the general audit, I mean, one of the issues that, we prompted the board to push for changing is, it's, I'm not sure whether it's writ law or just folklore, but, there's a good practice is to change your auditors every 3 to 4 years, so different sets of eyes
Yeah.
are looking at it. We've fallen way out of practice with that, so without disparaging the most immediate auditors, it was an objective of the board, especially given current circumstances, to at least do that part.
Yep.
And then beyond that, to do the deep dive audit with a separate entity.
So that becomes part of a budget every 3rd year or something, is what I mean, to do it.
I would like to see it memorialized that, we kind of hold our feet to the fire that we should change it.
Should do it, absolutely, yeah. I would agree with that.
Perhaps at some point we can look at, if the Division of Revenue has recommendations on the actual time frame. I've heard slightly different numbers, but we just probably need to dig a little bit into what the recommendations are. Is it 3, is it 5?
Yeah.
But I do think, there are pros and cons in either direction, but in looking at everything, I think the pros in changing outweigh the cons of changing. So I do
Absolutely.
very much support, what has been discussed about changing auditors on a regular basis.
That's, in quote, the real world, the board of directors has an audit committee, and the auditors report to them. They don't even report to the CEO, they report to the board. So I have no issue with what you're suggesting. Now, just in order to get this moving, do you have a
What's the request, I guess? I didn't have the financial piece down.
So the proposal by Clifton Larson's for $14,000 for the internal control audit, and I do have a reserve fund transfer form here.
Okay. Not that I want to spend more money, but how much of an audit do you get for $14,000? I mean, that's at
Is that
$300,
just on the
$200
credit
to
cards?
$300 an hour.
Well, that's just on the finance and accounting.
So look inside
Okay.
the finance and accounting
Oh,
office.
okay, okay.
It's limited to the scope for the
Got it.
internal
Okay, okay.
controls that we
Yeah,
operate.
All right.
Got it.
That's fine, okay. So do we have a reserve fund transfer we can consider, or?
You have a form. She said she's got the form. You
Yeah.
can bring it up so we can read it and so on.
Cindy, Paul, guys don't see any issue with your board? I mean, if you haven't voted or talked about it, but.
Yeah, it's been our common practice that any reserve fund transfer that comes from our departments that
To
we
at least
vote on.
discuss it,
I
yeah.
don't think I think we discussed it, but I think it's probably a good idea that we go back and vote it, but it was discussed.
It was discussed.
Okay, so, you want to ask for,
Yeah, I need a motion.
Read it from that. You got it. Is it
Yeah,
said on?
we'll start it down there this time.
Steve, you want to read it?
Let's see. Motion to do a reserve fund transfer for, is that 14,000?
Yes.
14,000 to conduct an internal control audit of the finance accounting department, to be conducted by Clifton Larson Allen LLP.
Okay.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right?
Go ahead and sign it.
Sign it and pass it around.
I suppose one thing, you think with so many new people coming in, like a lot of the answers you get when somebody started asking questions, they'd say, we've always done it that way. Like, that's not gonna fly these days, right?
I know it's a difficult time for you too, but I think having two new people and two new sets of eyes is, I think.
And asking all those
refreshing.
questions, seriously, why?
Absolutely.
How come? Why? And, you know,
So
there needs
I-
to be a real answer, absolutely.
Don't be afraid to bring something up and, you know, bring it up to the board, bring it up to us.
Whoops.
Yeah, you won't hurt our feelings, especially when it comes to, when we're talking about our, you know, we talked about the budget calendar and things like that. I mean, that, I'm right in the mix of, why do we do it this way? Well, when I came on board, that's how we've always done it. But I know that there's probably some great ideas, you know, especially coming from other communities, where maybe there's a better way of
Well, they've changed
doing
the
it.
form.
It's on the back?
No, you don't have to sign the back. Just the front.
That's fine.
Well, that's really all we have. Thank you. The rest we're going to get into is really our internal business of,
I just wait when we just get the last names.
is,
'Cause I
the
didn't have them assign my title listed.
the liaison, our liaison responsibilities, and who, if any, or what, if any, changes we want to make, you can share those. You all know.
This is where we were signed last year, that you've seen that, sent it all out.
So this is-
I think
this
they all
is-
go together, I don't think they're separate copies, are they?
Yeah.
Maybe there's the 2 pages.
Thank you, Nita.
There we go.
Oh, it is?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So historically, we have, for those that don't know, each Fincom member is assigned different departments throughout the town to liaison with in regards to representation, in regards to the budget. So we meet with the departments throughout the year and discuss, you know, concerns, just really overall budget health. So each year we meet at the beginning of the year, usually the first few months, which we're in now, to discuss if we're going to keep the same duties we have in the past couple of years. You know, as a group, you know, I'd like to jump to another department just for my own, I think, yeah, moving around, I think it helps me understand each department a little bit better, so
Like
yes.
switching our auditors around, you know?
Yeah, you know, really,
yeah.
another set of
Yeah,
eyes,
right.
it just helps. And I'm not saying to do this on everything, but, you know, it's more of a personal thing. I would like one of the other big departments. I have the school committee right now, the school department, excuse me. Not that I don't want to keep the school department, I think it's usually, it's a 2-person job.
Yeah, that's
Greg and I
what thought.
both
Thank you.
do that. But I would like to try either the police, the fire, you know, one of the other big departments, that's all, to really kind of dig in and understand their budget a little bit more, so.
Whatever.
So just
So if you don't mind.
reassign them.
Yeah, well, I just, if there's something you see here, I don't want to, I'm not going to change everything. For instance, I'd like to take on the police. We'll just do that. We have to update some emails, I understand. If you don't, or you want to code do it with me, however, to understand the. Is there anything else in here that anyone's interested in doing that's different? I know we don't have a full board with Greg and Steve, so we can leave them where they are.
So you and Greg will do the school, police, and
Yeah, unless there's somebody that really chomping at the bit to hop in with Greg on the schools. Yeah, that is half our budget, so that it's one of those that I definitely have probably learned the most from. I walked right into it, coming into Fincom. You learn a lot about the whole town budget.
Thank you.
So So anything jumps out at you guys that you're interested in moving to? I know you've been around a while, so you've probably seen a lot of
I've done a lot of these. I would do
Yeah.
rec. I don't think I've ever done that one.
the park and rec.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that right now? That's
That's under me.
we're taking all yours.
So that's good, so I'm down to only 3, keep going.
That's the way with the fire. I mean, I have the fire department, done the fire department several years, and they're actually, it's a nice one to do. He's obviously very well prepared and all that, but
You've had the fire?
I have done them, so I don't, they're on my list now, but if somebody else wanted, that's a nice one to pick up, I would.
Fire department? Yeah, I think I did that one year.
You have?
Yeah, I did that, I think my first year.
When you were with somebody else, right? You were tagging along?
Yes.
You know, I would do police and fire, but I'd have to look at the schools. There's no way.
Yeah, right.
Just-
Yeah, and you're doing schools, right?
Well, me and Greg, it's
Yeah,
two,
yeah.
and DPW, it's actually both of us were doing both of those.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll gladly,
I mean, I can do rec and fire, because the other ones on my list, honestly, there's nothing there. I mean,
Okay.
it's, you know, it's,
I think keeping you two on schools is
Mhm.
the right
Yeah.
thing to do.
So schools and police, yeah.
and currently who's on, so it's just, you had fire, correct?
Mhm.
And you're just keeping it there. That doesn't change. Schools,
unless, I mean, Steve's not here, so, and, you know, I don't
Yeah.
know what he wants to do, so.
Tom, what did you pick?
I used to have cemetery, historical, and library. And, you know, Steve and I would kind of,
I just wonder so that when I do the minutes, I know who's, yeah, I can.
yeah.
yeah, so you're just looking for the changes, correct?
You doing rec? Bonnie?
I'd really like, because
Okay. I'll put, you know what, I'll put our name, I'll say,
beautiful, okay.
Just swap Alan and me. Let Alan do COA, town clerk on veterans.
is that what he has now?
No.
No. Okay, so Alan,
Yeah.
you want to just split?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
You're with it?
Yeah. He's a
Yes.
Yeah. So he's gonna take council aging, town clerk, and veteran service. And you're just taking over what he had, correct?
I'd be happy to take finance director, assessors, tax collector.
Well, that's what he just said. Fred was gonna jump in.
Oh, you're, okay,
Yeah, I,
got it. No, that's fine.
Fred spends a lot of time in the.
Feel free to join.
Yeah, that's the thing, there's nothing to say we
Yeah.
can't, when someone's not here, or when you go to meet, to discuss things that two people do, that's great.
Sign up for that as well, that's fine.
Is that what you wanna do?
What's that?
You wanna jump in with Fred on a couple
Sure.
of those? Okay.
Sure.
So you'll put out an updated list?
Yeah,
And then she can put it into the minute?
let me do that.
And then send it to.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you're gonna give Steve a chance, or
Right,
is it he's
I-
not here, so he's not here, or?
Right, I'm
wait a
just,
minute.
but, you know,
Say
you
right.
guys are here, so you guys are getting the first.
Right, there we
dibs.
go.
That's kinda how we,
Yep, that's
I will
good.
teach Steve to
So what does Steve got? What does he do now? Where's
Steve has
electric light, water,
cemetery,
cemetery.
Historical and library,
Yeah.
so
electric light, cemetery, so I mean, maybe there's some flip-flops with Greg, or,
probably don't get much with this one. They probably don't talk much, right? Nothing here, there's no money. Usually good. This is a good place
No,
for
the
Steve to be.
libraries-
That's a good place for Steve to be,
yeah,
so.
yep.
Even though it's operating, it's not that, but. Yeah, just curious.
All right, so I'll move, so, I'll get those to you.
And then I'll put it.
If
You can reach out to Greg.
Yeah, that's the thing, just to let them know what we did, and then they can add a lot of stuff.
Subtract, right.
Great. All right. Welcome back.
Sorry.
We reassigned you.
Okay.
You've been reassigned.
Now,
shuffled up.
I have school, police, fire, and
Yeah, you got it.
and DPW.
No. But we did move you to Council on Aging.
Okay, good.
No, we did. Town Clerk, is that correct? And Veteran Services.
Where I can't do any damage, right?
Oh,
Well,
that's-
you're learning,
That's good.
finally. It only took you 22 years, and you finally learned it.
And then, so really, Fred and you kind of I just flip-flopped the two, and then Tom, he's gonna jump in and help on some of these as well. So really, it's just Council on Aging, Town Clerk, and Veterans. And I moved over to Police. Betsy took over on the rec. Yeah, it's gonna be good. All right, well, that's out of the way. Next, I have member input, so. Anything for, no? Okay. It's the summer, so I
Go
don't know.
Tigers.
Coming into the season, sure. Alan?
Nope, my committee hasn't met in several years, so
Okay,
that's a Space Needs Committee. So.
I got you.
I went to one of these like magic, one of these regional meetings, had to do with the Transportation Advisory Council that I'm on. Some of the towns, one of the towns has a grant, and some of the towns are considering these micro, how do they call it, micro transportation? I don't know. But basically, it's like they use Uber and Lyft as opposed to, or in addition to, the vans and so on that we have to help the elders and so on get around and do places. And they basically subsidize.
The reimbursable.
Yeah, and Uber and Lyft have to have all the software to make that very easy for the towns to do this. So that maybe, like one town, I think it was Carlisle, the town pays the first, I don't know if it was $5, and then the user would have to pay the next 10, and then the town would pick up again after that. And it's all set up, and there's some other things, like, because right now also, if you're in Boston, you need to go from this doctor to this doctor in Boston. Well, the vans don't help you, but if you had Uber or Lyft, you could do things like that, and there's even, controls in the software so they
Can't
know
go
you're in
to a
town.
concert.
Yeah, all that stuff. So anyway, it was interesting, but, and I, gave all the information to the right people, but, whether, the idea is that it's supplementary to, not instead of current
Sure.
systems. But, in the end, how much, does that subsidizing somebody's Lyft drive,
It's
ride
probably
by?
more cost effective than just running a
Yeah, right,
continuous
yeah,
bus
right.
that doesn't have everybody in it.
That's right.
Right,
So,
exactly.
And paying for the upkeep of the vehicle.
Right, so anyway, it was interesting, and so I
That's a
passed that
great-
information on. So anyway, just so you know, that's what some of the towns are looking at. And they have there's one of the towns, I think it was Sudbury, who actually sponsored the meeting, has a grant. And the grant isn't to subsidize the program. The grant is to pay for a project manager or program manager to try to kind of do best practices and share this among other towns so you can try what's working here and what's not and that kind of stuff. So it's, just one of those interesting things that's out there. It's always enlightening or enheartening or something that makes me feel good to see people working together and trying to come up with new things
Yeah.
and try new things as opposed to all the negative stuff you hear all the time,
It's outside the box.
Does this tie in with this Crosstown Connect?
Well,
Or
it
not,
could or
or
it will. I
is it
mean,
just
that's
seems
part of
like
the, yeah,
this
well.
all
but
these
that's-
In addition to.
Right now, the idea is that this is in addition to, so things that Crosstown Connect doesn't do is like on weekends, after hours, or if you're in Boston for a doctor that goes late and you're after the hours, well, what do you do? I mean, so that there's things that this might help with it. And it also could be that some people just need a ride, and like I said, on the weekends, maybe it's to a doctor, but maybe it's even a social thing. You want to go to a family
Yeah.
party. And if you're really isolated, that's an important thing to be able to do. And if that's subsidizing the Lyft drive, then maybe that's worthwhile to do. So, it's looking at different things in different ways. So anyway, that was interesting.
And then where does this, where do these towns put it under their budget? Where does it end up?
Well,
At the end of the day?
yeah, so they were just starting. So one of the towns, Carlisle, I think it was, they actually got a grant separate from this other project that was going on to try it. So they had a bucket of money to use. And actually the issue they had in the beginning, they thought, oh, how are we going to make this last for this much long? But it was actually more on the other side. They were having a hard time getting people to use it. Number one, if it's Uber or Lyft and you're using a phone, well, not everybody's comfortable doing that. And there's ways you can have somebody in your office do it, but then again, you're back to the 8 to 5 Monday through Friday thing again. So So that's, and then what happens next? That was the next discussion. People want to do it. Well, now you got a budget cycle. So,
Right.
what do you do? So maybe some of this grant money could be used just to get it started, because it doesn't take a lot really to start it, I guess, in the bottom line. If you're really subsidizing $10 a ride, and if that's what, I mean, you can do anything you want. That was this one town did it that way.
Yeah.
It goes further than you think it will. So,
Uh-huh.
so that's that. And tomorrow night, we got a CPC meeting. I'm probably gonna see the same presentation I saw tonight, plus some other ones. So,
All right.
No, so,
Did we get, I think Steve gave us a little bit of an update. Did he talk to you at all about some of the issues at the police station? The masonry, I know.
yeah, well, last time we talked was at the presentation that the three of us went to.
Yeah.
And then he did send out an email saying that they're expecting in the next week or so better numbers of the damage that has been done with the weather down there. So they have verified that the weather stripping or something was not properly attached to the inside of the building, so water got in and the walls are falling apart. So I hope our new library lasts longer than our new police station. But that sounds like it's going to be bigger than the bread box for us in the fall. I can't imagine what it's going to cost to put that thing back together again.
So, just as far as the taxpayer is concerned, I think, Steve, are you meeting with the insurance company? Yeah, so that's an option. Hopefully that, the claim, but that comes with its own issues when we file a claim. And
Steve, what's our deductible on something like that? It's got to be pretty significant, right?
Off the top of my head, I really don't know, Fred.
Okay.
So that is something we just kind of put on our radar. I know Steve has been working closely with that, and then the insurance, and then, are we dealing with a faulty construction situation? Well, we don't know. So let that play itself out, but it's just something to be aware of, that there's problems with the police station's roof, water leaking through the walls and creating an issue, and they've pulled it apart and identified the issues, and we'll find out where that leads us. Yeah, the windows are bowing a little bit from the moisture.
And we talked about the oak
Yeah.
tree.
Yeah.
They talked about it at PNBC last week.
So we'll see where that leads, but it is, you're right, it could potentially be something we see in the fall.
more draws on our capital reserves and what we have and where it's gonna go. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
right?
so
I mean,
we continue to be good stewards of the reserve funds and use it for those are the type of things we.
and we have to make sure there's enough money for maintenance going forward. That's, right.
Absolutely. We typically don't think of important maintenance on a 10-year-old
No,
building.
right, but.
Certainly not on a home like that, something that significant, so. Other than that, my update, we already talked about it, Fred and I and Steve attended the IG's meeting, and we learned a lot, and we're going to share that with as many people as possible once we get the presentation, and it might even end up in an LCTV. I think it was that important, especially with what's going on here, to see the presentation like that. That's really all I have.
Oh, one thing, I noticed on the selectmen's packet that there was a proposal to bring forward a facilities director, which the finance committee has been pushing for 10 years, and funded 2 years ago, and hasn't been filled. Any feedback on? I didn't stay up that late to watch it last night, to be honest with you.
So the discussion was that both the vacancy the anticipated vacancy in building commissioner, as well as the ongoing vacancy in the funded position for facilities director, would be discussed at likely the next 3 Board of Selectmen's meetings for a decision with a goal of October. so that we can begin the postings. The board has wanted to look at the organization, considering that both of these positions have, well, the building commissioner position will become vacant September 4th, for all intents and purposes, and to see if there's any organizational effectiveness of looking at the structure of different positions, and these two in particular, since they have some relationship. You know, I don't know if it would be as far as combining the role, or if it would be that the conclusion would be that it doesn't make sense to combine anything. I think all cards are on the table at this point, and the Board of Selectmen identified at a previous meeting and reconfirmed at its meeting last night that Chuck DeCoste and Cindy Napoli and I would work on preparing recommendations for further discussion at upcoming Board of Selectmen's meetings on that.
Okay.
All right, well, since you brought that up, the assistant town administrator discussion also took place last night. So if you could just refresh my memory, did we decide to look at a temporary, or are we?
We didn't. We decided that we were gonna post the job description that was contained, a marked up job description of the assistant town administrator was contained in yesterday evening's Board of Selectmen packet.
Yeah.
And after some lengthy discussion, the decision was to move forward with the proposed revisions to the job description and post it. It does need to go to the personnel board first to make sure that the revisions haven't made a material change in the classification, and then once it's gone through that process, it's gonna be posted. Further discussion will take place at the Board of Selectmen's meeting to discuss the structure of the interview not the interview process, but the interview team, and perhaps any other expectations that the board may have regarding the process.
All right, thank you. Another update.
Happy to help.
Minutes, I guess, would be our last
Okay,
debate.
Gary, well, all
Yeah.
I have, now, you might have had a July meeting, I
Yeah.
have no idea if
I
you
owe
did.
the minutes.
Okay, so we'll hit those next go
Okay.
round. Okay.
All right, so what I have is the June 26th special meeting, and I'll read what I wrote. The members, there was a draft of the Littleton Finance Committee, June 26th, Charles K. Memorial Gymnasium, Littleton. Members present, Fred Faulkner, Alan McCray, Tom Perrell, Betsy Bowen. Absent, Greg Champney, Gary Wilson, Steve Moore. Meeting called to order at 7:35 p.m. by Chairman Fred Faulkner. Minutes. The minutes of April 3rd, April 23rd, and May 6th were moved, seconded, and approved. No action taken on the citizens' petition, Article 1 of the June 26, 2019 special town meeting. Motion to adjourn at 6:45 p.m. was moved, seconded, and approved.
I guess these are the 4 members that were there, so we do have a quorum of members, so could,
And I'm no longer the chair, so I can move to accept the minutes as written. Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous amongst the 4.
And I'll get those. Great, so we're up
And
for the
I
next.
understand that the March 19th ones were
When was
not
it?
approved because
We
people
didn't-
weren't there.
But
The
they
members
were,
that.
they were approved, in the last meeting.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
they were?
Yeah.
Right, so
Okay.
those can go.
Those can go.
on.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were approved at our last meeting. In July.
Yeah, and that'll go on the minutes for this one.
Yeah, when he sends it to me, right?
We're good.
Right.
Okay.
So we've got tonight and the July meeting are the only 2 there. That shouldn't be up posted. Great.
So the last piece that I skipped over public input, because there's no public here.
Seeing
but
the-
I will say it, just I want to really quickly, kind of an alibi here, just our next meeting is September 9th, a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. It's on a Monday, so hopefully Mr. Champney has a little bit better luck there. That is the 1 week a quarter that I am actually in DC. So I'll be watching it, streaming it live, but so you'll, if you're around, hopefully.
If I show
You're
up,
good.
I'll
You-
share it.
Yeah, okay.
And if not, Coral will do it.
We'll move right down the line. And then I also have scheduled a September 24th meeting as well, and that's right after the warrant closes, so we can hopefully vote on, wrap that up, and then I'd like to, maybe on the 9th, we can get together before then and discuss our schedule. I mean, looking at, hopefully can line it up with the budget, process.
Now, Gary, on the BOS meeting, you don't need me there to take meetings because it's a Board of Selectmen's meeting, not a Selectmen's, is that correct?
That's correct.
Not
Yeah.
Fincom,
Yep.
okay. Just
Yeah,
checking.
thank you, though. That's all I have, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second, I waited a long time to do that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.